big episode today. We're going to talk about the July 4th holiday.
We're getting into more of the holiday itself. Every year, I'm sure you guys all gather together, big parties, celebrations, but do you really know the history behind the 4th of July? Today, we're getting into that, and we're going to go over all the facts.
We also have birthdays and crazy events that happen to have happened on July 4th.
Things that you probably didn't know already.
So stay with us.
Stay tuned and stick around for the 4th of July episode.
It's the Ryan P. Miller Show!
Welcome back to the Ryan P. Miller Show. I'm Ryan. I'm here with Julie.
Hi, guys.
Today we're doing something a little different. No safety checklist. Today we're telling a story. A long, complicated, beautiful, and at times deeply uncomfortable American story. It's the story of the 4th of July. It's a special episode for the holiday and America's 250th birthday. Julie, do you know anybody who celebrates an entire birthday week?
Yes, and also people who have birthday months. If you know, you know.
Well, the United States is having a 250 birthday summer.
That seems appropriate. She deserves it.
Yeah, definitely. So there are a lot of famous birthdays, and we're going to get into that further in the show.
Most of us grew up with a pretty simple version of this holiday. Fireworks, hot dogs, red, white, and blue everything, and a basic understanding that on July 4th, 1776, America declared its independence from Britain.
And that's true. But the full story of what this holiday has meant, who celebrated it and who didn't, who was excluded from its promise and fought to be included anyway, and how one of America's most beautiful cities wrestled with what independence even meant after a war that tore the country in half. That story's worth knowing.
Especially because so many of us are going to be out in our yards, parks, and town squares on this holiday. And knowing the history behind what we're celebrating makes the celebration richer. It doesn't diminish it, it deepens it.
Right.
This podcast is brought to you by Ryan's new book, The Safe School Bus Ride, a guide for parents and children. This is a children's book in rhyme with fun images that also has talking points for parents or educators to stop and discuss school bus safety topics with kids. Pick up a copy today. Link is in the show notes. If you know a future kindergartner, send them this book today. It will make their transition to school a little easier and a lot safer.
And Julie, we also have a new sponsor, Starlink. We just switched our internet from our cable company. We had fiber, which is very expensive. We live in a rural area. Now we have internet at both our house and rental property for what we were previously paying for just one property. It's easy to set up. I mounted it to our barn. Well, it wasn't that easy. I don't like heights, but you can also have a professional install it. It took me about an hour or so.
Yeah, Ryan takes the Tim Allen approach.
I did buy a wall mount bracket because I didn't want to mount it on the roof. If you want to know a secret, I actually bought the bracket on Amazon.
And for our listeners, use the link in the show notes for 1 free month. Ryan's installation not included.
All right, so let's go back to the beginning. This is the day that almost wasn't July 4th. Here's the first thing that most people don't realize. July 4th was not actually the date that independence was declared. That honor belongs to July 2nd, 1776.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, definitely. On July 2nd, the Second Continental Congress voted in favor of independence from Great Britain. John Adams, who would later become the second president, was so certain that July 2nd was the date that would go down in history, he wrote to his wife, Abigail, predicting that the 2nd of July would be celebrated for generations with parades and fireworks.
So he missed it by 2 days.
Yes, by 2 days. What happened was on July 4th, the formal adoption of the Declaration of Independence, the document itself, Congress approved the final wording on July 4th, 1776. That's the date printed on top of the document. So July 4th became the date that stuck. So as far as the Declaration, what was actually said? Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration with significant edits from Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and the full Congress. The document was a formal announcement to the world, specifically to other nations who might consider helping the American cause, that the colonies were breaking from Britain and why.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson, Declaration of Independence, 1776.
Those words would echo forward through American history, in ways the founders themselves didn't fully anticipate. Invoked by abolitionists, by suffragists, and by civil rights leaders, Frederick Douglass would wield them like a weapon in one of the most powerful speeches in American history. But we'll get there. So who was in the room?
Colonies represented: all 13 original colonies: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Total delegates who signed: 56 men ultimately signed the Declaration. Notable non-signers on July 4th were John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, who refused to sign, believing the move premature. The age range of the signers included the youngest signer, who was Edward Rutledge of South Carolina, was 26 years old, and the oldest was Benjamin Franklin himself, who was 70 years old.
Also, if you want to learn more about Benjamin Franklin, there's a really wonderful episode of The Office. It's season 3, episode 15, called Benjamin Franklin, where Jim hires a Benjamin Franklin impersonator for a bachelorette party instead of a male stripper, but they don't realize that.
Total common mistake.
Absolutely. The Benjamin Franklin impersonator shows up, and all the information is 100% accurate. I didn't realize that Benjamin Franklin had a bald cap.
I remember that episode. It was pretty good.
All right, so moving on.
Moving on.
Moving on. The contradiction that was already there. It would be dishonest to talk about the Declaration without addressing this directly. The man who wrote that all men are created equal and endowed with the right to liberty owned human beings. Thomas Jefferson owned more than 600 enslaved people over his lifetime. And the delegates who adopted this ringing Declaration of Human Freedom included slave owners from Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. The contradiction was present from the first moment. Many of the founders knew it and struggled with it. Many didn't struggle with it nearly enough.
That's not a reason to diminish the Declaration. Those words genuinely changed the world, but it's the reason this holiday has always meant something different to different Americans. And that's the thread we're going to follow for a big part of today's episode.
So how July 4th became what we know today. Early celebrations. In 1777, the first organized July 4th celebration was in Philadelphia. 1 year after independence, Philadelphia marked the anniversary with a spontaneous celebration that included bells, bonfires, candles in windows, and a gunpowder salute. 13 shots for 13 colonies. The city's ships were decorated. It was, by contemporary accounts, it was a fun, joyful night. Fireworks were part of the celebration almost from the very beginning. This was a deliberate choice. John Adams himself, in a famous letter to Abigail, had called for illuminations as part of how the day should be marked. Fireworks spoke to spectacle, to power, to the noise of something new in the world.
So every year on the 4th of July, all the dogs and cats can now blame John Adams himself.
Absolutely.
Thanks, John.
In 1783, the Revolutionary War officially ends, and we have the Treaty of Paris. With the war concluded, July 4th celebrations began spreading beyond Philadelphia. Towns across the new nation held parades, dinners, and readings of the Declaration. The political parties of the early republic, Federalists and Democratic Republicans, each began using the 4th as a political platform, holding rival celebrations and competing for the symbolic ownership of the day. In 1826, we had the 50th anniversary and the deaths of Adams and Jefferson. Here's one of the most remarkable coincidences of American history. On July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the adoption of the Declaration, both John Adams and Thomas Jefferson passed away on the same day.
Whoa, that's crazy.
It is. It's an amazing coincidence. John Adams's last reported words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He didn't know that Jefferson had died hours earlier that morning. The country took this as a sign. The Republic's founders had held on long enough to see its 50th birthday and then departed together. In 1870, July 4th became a federal holiday. It took nearly 100 years for the 4th to be formally recognized by the federal government. In 1870, Congress declared Independence Day a federal unpaid holiday. It didn't become a paid federal holiday for federal employees until 1938.
Wow, 1938.
Yeah.
Traditions that built over time. Fireworks. A tradition since 1777, deeply embedded in Independence Day from the first year forward. Parades. a staple since the early 1800s, often featuring military units, civil organizations, and political leaders. Barbecues and outdoor gatherings. This grew substantially in the 19th and early 20th centuries as the holiday became a day off for working Americans. Political speeches. The 4th was one of the primary civic occasions for major addresses throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was delivered at a related ceremony in November 1863, but he frequently used 4th of July context for major statements. The Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem, written by Francis Scott Key during the War of 1812, gradually became tied to 4th of July celebrations through the 19th century.
All right. So the 4th for Black Americans, a holiday with a different meaning. During a lot of this time, we still had slavery. What was 4th of July to the slaves? We need to spend real time here because no episode on the history of the 4th of July that skips this chapter is telling the full story. For enslaved Black Americans, the 4th of July was not a celebration. It was, at its most painful, a taunt, a day when white America declared its freedom loudly with bells and cannon fire and speeches about liberty, while millions of human beings remained in chains on that same soil. On July 5th, 1852, deliberately not the 4th itself, Frederick Douglass delivered what is widely considered one of the greatest speeches in American history to an audience in Rochester, New York. It was called, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?"
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all the other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty, an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity. Frederick Douglass. What to the slave is the 4th of July? July 5th, 1852.
Douglass wasn't rejecting the Declaration. He was holding America accountable to it. He actually said the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. He believed in it deeply. He was demanding that the nation live up to its own founding words.
And this was 1852, 13 years before the end of the Civil War. Slavery was still in full operation across half the country.
Juneteenth, the 4th that didn't apply. Even after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed on January 1st, 1863, the freedom it declared was not immediate or universal. It only applied to states in rebellion, and it was enforced only where Union troops could enforce it. In Texas, enslaved people didn't receive word of their freedom until June 19th, 1865. 2.5 months after the war ended, when Union soldiers arrived in Galveston. That date became Juneteenth. Now a federal holiday of its own, in many communities, it functions as the real Independence Day.
Because for these communities, July 4th had never meant freedom. Juneteenth was the day that did.
Black celebrations of the 4th, a parallel tradition. Here's something less widely known. Some free Black communities in the North did celebrate 4th of July, but often on July 5th, as Douglass did, as a deliberate statement, or they created their own parallel celebrations rooted in abolitionist principles. After the Civil War and emancipation, Black Americans across the South began celebrating the 4th in ways that were explicitly about the freedom of the Declaration promised, in which they were now demanding to be extended to them fully. In many Southern cities, during Reconstruction, integrated 4th of July celebrations took place for the first time. Union leagues, freemen's organizations, and Republican political clubs organized public events. These were celebrations of the Declaration's promise, finally extended, however, imperfectly and temporary, to Black citizens. And in the white Southern And in the response to those celebrations, we'll get to this, we can see exactly how contested the meaning of the holiday was. The South, after the Civil War, refusing the 4th, when the 4th became the enemy's holiday. The Civil War ended in April 1865 with Robert E. Lee's surrender. And what followed in the former Confederate States was one of the most extraordinary and contested periods in American history, the Reconstruction. For many white Southerners, particularly those who believed deeply in the Confederate cause, 4th of July represented a profound psychological problem. The holiday celebrated the founding ideas of the nation, liberty, independence, and the right to break from a government one considered tyrannical.
Which is exactly the argument the Confederacy had made for secession.
Exactly. And so after losing the war, many white Southerners found themselves in a complicated position with respect to the 4th. They could hardly celebrate the holiday rooted in national unity when they just spent 4 years trying to permanently divide the nation. And they could not celebrate a holiday about liberty and equality in a moment when Black Americans, for the first time legally free, and beginning to exercise civil rights.
The Southern boycott of Independence Day. In many parts of the former Confederacy, July 4th was simply not celebrated. For decades, the holiday was seen as a Yankee celebration, a Union holiday, a Northern imposition on a defeated people. Confederate veterans organizations, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and local political structures in the Deep South actively discouraged participation in 4th of July festivities during the late 19th century. Instead, the South developed its own calendar of commemorative holidays. Jefferson David's birthday in June, Confederate Memorial Day, and Robert E. Lee's birthday in January. These became the sacred observations of what came to be called the Lost Cause, ideological framework that reframed Confederate defeat as a noble, tragic sacrifice rather than a failed defense of slavery.
The contested public space. During Reconstruction, roughly 1865 to 1877, 4th of July celebrations in southern cities were politically charged in ways that's hard to fully imagine today. Black citizens, supported by the Republican Party and in many cases by federal troops, organized and attended public 4th of July events as a demonstration of their new citizenship. These celebrations were often explicitly political, rallies for civil rights, voter registration, and the extension of the promise of the Declaration to the formerly enslaved. White Southern Democrats, the political party that controlled the antebellum South and opposed Reconstruction, frequently responded with hostility. 4th of July celebrations that mixed Black and white attendees were sometimes disrupted, and in some documented cases, threatened with violence.
So the same holiday could be in the same city on the same day, a celebration of freedom for one group and an act of aggression for another.
That's exactly right. In Savannah, Georgia, one of the most historically layered cities in the entire South, is a perfect place to look at how all of this played out on the ground. This episode is brought to you by Starlink. I want to talk about this one because it's genuinely a game changer.
So we're talking about satellite internet and internet that actually works. We don't want any buffering every 5 minutes. We're talking about real high-speed internet directly from space.
Yeah, absolutely. And we live in a rural area. We had regular internet from the cable company. It was very expensive, so this is much more reasonably priced. We mounted it to our barn, and Starlink connects. It's fast, low latency internet no matter where you are.
The setup is pretty straightforward. I personally didn't do it, but from Ryan's experience, it was pretty straightforward. You basically get a compact dish, and you point it directly at the sky. Then, bam, you're online. No technician visit, no long installation window.
Yeah, there's a little app, tells you exactly where to point it, and then you're done. As long as you have a view of the sky and you don't have a lot of obstructions, then you're all set. And here's the best part for the listeners. If you use the link in our show notes to sign up, you get your first month of Starlink completely free. So that's 1 month on us just for being a listener.
If you want to join Starlink, find the link in today's show notes through our referral link for that free month.
Starlink, high-speed internet from space, wherever you are.
Space.
From space.
School buses are built to be 70 times safer than a car when involved in a vehicle accident. But when our children are boarding and exiting the bus, it's often the most dangerous part of their day. Children and parents are often not as aware of risks and safety rules of a school bus as they should be. Do you or your child know where the blind spots of a bus are? Or where you should walk to be seen by the bus driver? Or what do in a school bus emergency? Or how to safely cross the street in front of a school bus? A safe school bus ride was written to give both parents and students a knowledge to build safe habits around their school bus. Let's keep these kids safe. Pick up your copy today.
It's the Ryan P. Miller Show. Let's go!
All right, so we first started off 1776. The United States just declared independence from England. King George III is sitting in England, going through a breakup, eating ice cream, watching rom-coms. And the United States says, "It's not me, it's you."
Well, I guess it was their loss.
How do you feel about what we've gone over so far?
To be quite honest, I have been learning a lot. The majority of the stuff I didn't even know in regards to the 4th of July.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. And unfortunately, it's stuff that we probably all should really know, but we're not aware of.
Yeah, it really puts the context into the holiday when we're having hot dogs and enjoying our cookouts. So we're about to get into the story of what happened in Savannah. The reason why I decided to do this episode for 4th of July is because I was doing some Civil War research and I came across all this information about Savannah. And I just really found that fascinating. Julie and I both love Savannah as a city. It's a city that I've really fallen in love with over the decades, and I've been to many times. There's just so much history there. There's a lot of Civil War history, and there's a lot of history that we're about to go over regarding the 4th of July holiday. So the segment we're about to get into is really why we decided to do this episode.
It was just a beautiful city. It's a very walkable, lots to do, so rich in history. There's just a lot to learn. Hoping we can go back one day. So we'll get into how Savannah, Georgia plays a part with the 4th of July.
All right, so Savannah, Georgia, city's complicated, July 4th. Savannah, Georgia is one of those American cities that carries an almost impossible weight of history. Founded in 1733 by James Oglethorpe as the first settlement of the Georgia colony. It was a city built, as so much of the antebellum South was, on the labor of enslaved people, and its wealth before the Civil War flowed directly from cotton in that institution. When General William Sherman ended his march to the sea at Savannah in December 1864, he famously sent President Lincoln a telegram offering Savannah as a Christmas gift. The city surrendered rather than being burned, and Sherman occupied it peacefully, sparing it the destruction he'd left across Georgia.
Offering Savannah as a Christmas gift was just interesting. That relatively peaceful occupation met Savannah entered Reconstruction with its physical infrastructure largely intact, even as its social and political structure was about to be entirely upended.
The first post-war 4th in Savannah, 1865. On July 4th, 1865, was a different kind of holiday in Savannah. It was the first Independence Day in 4 years without an active war, and the first in the city's history where Black residents were legally free. Savannah's freemen, the formerly enslaved population, now citizens under federal law, organized public celebrations of the 4th that year that were unlike anything the city had ever seen. They marched. They held public readings of Declaration of Independence and the Emancipation Proclamation. They organized politically through union leagues and freemen's bureaus. For these men and women, the 4th of July in 1865 was not ironic or uncomfortable. It was genuine, earned celebration. The words of the Declaration that all men are created equal and endowed with certain rights had just been applied to them by force of arms and constitutional amendment. They were celebrating those words as their own.
Savannah's white elite and the boycott. Savannah's white planter and merchant class, many of whom had actively supported secession and whose wealth had depended on the institution of slavery, largely sat out the 4th of July celebrations during Reconstruction. For these families, the holiday was associated not with their own independence, but with what they experienced as occupation and humiliation. The Confederate officers who had commanded local troops, families who had sent sons to die in a war, they now described as a noble lost cause. They were not about to march in parades, celebrating the Union that had defeated them. Savannah's newspapers in the immediate post-war years reflect this bitterness vividly. The Savannah Morning News, which had supported secession and the Confederacy through the war, reported on 4th of July events during Reconstruction with a kind of cold detachment, noting the celebrations of Black residents and Union sympathizers while clearly not endorsing or participating in the spirit of the day.
The Beach Institute and Black Savannah's 4th. The Beach Institute, established in Savannah in 1867 by the American Missionary Association and the Freedmen's Bureau, became one of the anchors of Black civic life in the city. Schools like this and the churches that had long served as organized hearts of Black community life became the organizing centers for 4th of July celebrations in Black Savannah. These weren't small private events. They were public, deliberate, and political. Black Savannians on the 4th of July were demonstrating citizenship. They were demonstrating that they understood the Declaration, had fought for the Union's principles in many cases, and intended to be full participants in the civic life the Declaration had promised. Savannah streets when two celebrations existed simultaneously. During the Reconstruction, in many years, Savannah effectively had two parallel 4th of July observations happening simultaneously or deliberately on different days. Black residents and their Republican allies celebrated publicly and openly. White Democrats largely did not celebrate at all or held private, sullen acknowledgments of the day they didn't feel belonged to them.
It's really such a vivid illustration of what the country was going through at the time. The same city, the same holiday, completely different experiences of what it meant.
Yeah, absolutely. When Reconstruction ended in 1877 through the contested election of 1876 and the Compromise of 1877, by which federal troops were withdrawn from the South, the political situation for Black Southerners changed dramatically and rapidly for the worse. In Savannah and across the South, the political and civic gains of Reconstruction began to roll back through a combination of violence, illegal disenfranchisement, and the terror of organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. Black political participation was simultaneously suppressed, and the integrated or Black organized 4th of July celebrations that had characterized Reconstruction-era Savannah gave way to a more segregated landscape where the holiday's meaning was again contested and controlled.
The reunion narrative, when the South came back to the 4th, the lost cause and the remaking of July 4th. By the 1880s and 1890s, something interesting began to happen with the 4th of July in the South. The holiday started coming back, but in a very specifically shaped form. As the lost cause narrative solidified, the ideological project of reinterpreting Confederate defeat as a noble sacrifice for states' rights and Southern honor, rather than a failed defense of slavery. White Southern leaders began to find ways to re-enter American civic life without fully reckoning with what the war had been about. The 4th of July offered a vehicle for this, the reunion narrative, the idea that North and South were Americans together, that it was time to heal and move forward, was promoted by veterans, organizations, and political leaders on both sides, and the 4th became a platform for that message.
What the reunion left out. The reconciliation narrative of the late 19th century had a critical feature. It almost entirely excluded Black Americans from the story of the war and its aftermath. The cause of the war was increasingly discussed not as slavery, but as competing constitutional visions. The suffering of 4 million enslaved people and 300 years of bondage that preceded the war were systematically minimized in the dominant national memory. And the 4th of July, as it was reclaimed by the white South, carried this selective memory with it.
Which is why monuments to Confederate generals went up in courthouses and city squares across the South in this same period, because the story being told about the war was being actively rewritten, and public space was part of that rewriting.
Absolutely right. And Savannah has several of those monuments, some of which have been the subject of significant civic debate in more recent decades. The 20th century, a unified patriotic holiday. Through the early 20th century, World War I, the Depression, World War II, the 4th of July gradually became more unified expression across the country. The war years especially drove a kind of enforced national solidarity that papered over many of the regional divisions. By the mid-20th century, the 4th, as a fireworks and picnic holiday, was genuinely national, celebrated across the South as enthusiastically as anywhere. The complicated Reconstruction-era history had largely been lost from popular memory. But with the underlying tensions about who the Declaration's promise applied to and whether the country had lived up to them never fully went away. They would surface again powerfully in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s when Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders returned again and again to the language of the Declaration as the moral foundation of their demand for equality. What the 4th looks like today. The holiday re-inherited. So here we are. The fireworks are going up in every town in America tonight. The hot dogs are on the grill, and most of us are not thinking about the Reconstruction-era Savannah or Frederick Douglass or competing celebrations of 1866.
And that's not wrong necessarily. A holiday can hold a complicated history and still be a genuine celebration.
Exactly. Knowing the history makes the celebration more honest and more meaningful, because what we're actually celebrating on the 4th isn't just a date on a calendar. We're celebrating a set of ideas that were and perfectly applied from day one that generations of Americans have fought and bled and died to extend and protect and make more real. So here are the numbers of the modern 4th of July. Amount spent on fireworks annually, over $1 billion in consumer fireworks, plus significant public display spending every year on 4th of July. Hot dogs consumed. Americans consume an estimated 150 million hot dogs on Independence Day, the single biggest hot dog day of the year.
That's a lot of hot dogs.
It is a lot of hot dogs. We had one hot dog each this year.
Yeah, I guess we're a part of the 150 million, though.
We are. So 4th of July is a travel holiday, one of the 5 busiest travel holidays in America, with hundreds of millions of car trips and significant air travel.
Savannah today celebrates the 4th of July with genuine enthusiasm. The city's riverfront hosts one of the more spectacular fireworks shows in the South. The squares, those iconic planned green spaces that Oglethorpe designed into the original city layout, fill with families. The city's mix of long-term residents, military families from nearby Fort Stewart, and tourists creates a genuinely diverse celebration. And the Beach Institute, that building from 1867 that was once the organizing center of Black civic life during Reconstruction, still stands in Savannah's Victorian district, now operating as the Beach Institute African American Cultural Center. It's a living link to the complicated 4th of Julys of 150 years ago.
Yeah, and that's a good example of the journey that most cities in the United States have taken with this holiday.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
So Juneteenth and the 4th. One of the most significant recent developments in how America marks the summer is the elevation of Juneteenth, June 19th, to a federal holiday status in 2021. Juneteenth now sits about 2 weeks before the 4th of July. For many Americans, the two holidays together tell a more complete story of American freedom than either one alone.
The 4th is the declaration. Juneteenth is the fulfillment, or at least the beginning of it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. So on this day on July 4th, all right, we covered a lot of ground today. The founding, the Declaration, the Civil War, Savannah, the whole complicated, beautiful mess of what July 4th actually means in this country. And we want to close with a slightly lighter note.
Good, because my brain's getting a little full.
So here's the thing about July 4th. Because it's such a famous day, a lot of other things have happened on it. Things that absolutely nothing to do with American independence, but are genuinely interesting and surprising.
Famous birthdays, historical moments, scientific discoveries, we're going through them.
So we're going through everything remarkable that's happened on July 4th that you probably didn't learn in school.
Events that had nothing to do with fireworks. 1817, the Erie Canal breaks ground. Workers broke ground on the Erie Canal in Rome, New York, on July 4th, a deliberate choice to tie the project to patriotic symbolism. The canal, completed in 1825, connected the Great Lakes to the Hudson River and transformed New York City into the commercial capital of the country. Without the Erie Canal, genuinely impossible, Chicago, New York, becomes the dominant American city of the 19th century.
Someone in 1817 said, you know what would be great? Start digging the most important piece of infrastructure in American history on the 4th of July. Good call.
Yep, it clearly worked.
It did.
5. Walt Whitman publishes Leaves of Grass. On July 4th, 1855, Whitman self-published the first edition of Leaves of Grass, a collection of 12 poems that would go on to be considered one of the most important works in American literary history. He printed 795 copies. It did not sell well initially. One of the few people who immediately recognized it as a masterpiece was Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote Whitman a glowing letter. He self-published it on the 4th of July, and it's now one of the most celebrated books in American history. 1828, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad breaks ground. 1 year after America's first passenger railway company was founded, the B&O Railroad broke ground on July 4th, 1828. Again, deliberately on Independence Day, the first stone was laid by Charles Carroll, the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, who was 90 years old at the time. He reportedly said laying that stone was the most important act of his life, second only to signing the Declaration.
So he's 90 years old. last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, laying the cornerstone of the American railroad system on July 4th. So he lived through the entire founding of the country.
Yes, that's so amazing to learn. It's one of those details that should be in every history book, and it isn't. 1997. NASA's Mars Pathfinder lands on Mars. On July 4th, 1997, NASA's Mars Pathfinder spacecraft became the first U.S. craft to land on Mars in more than 20 years, and the first ever to deploy a surface rover, the famous Sojourner rover. The landing date was not accidental. NASA specifically aimed for July 4th as a symbolic touch. The rover explored the Martian surface for 83 days. Transmitting over 16,000 images back to Earth. We landed a rover on Mars on the 4th of July on purpose. 2012. Scientists announced the discovery of the Higgs boson. On July 4th, 2012, physicists at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, announced they had detected the Higgs boson particle, sometimes called the God particle. The Higgs boson had been theorized since the 1960s. Finding it confirmed a fundamental piece of the standard model of physics, our best current framework for understanding how the universe works. The discovery eventually led to a Nobel Prize.
Scientists at CERN chose July 4th to announce arguably the most significant physics discovery of the 21st century. So we found the God particle. Happy 4th of July, America.
Coco the gorilla is born. On July 4th, 1971, a western lowland gorilla was born at the San Francisco Zoo and named Hanabiko, which means fireworks child in Japanese, in honor of her Independence Day birthday. The world came to know her simply as Coco. She went on to become the most famous gorilla in history, learning over 1,000 signs in modified American Sign Language and understanding approximately 2,000 spoken English words. Coco passed away in 2018. Coco, the gorilla who could speak in sign language, was born on the 4th of July, and her name literally means fireworks child.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, what a nice story. It's my first time learning about Coco. Now for 46. The Philippines gains independence from the United States. On July 4th, 1946, in a moment of deliberate and symbolic choice, the United States formally granted independence to the Philippines. The date was chosen specifically to echo American Independence Day. The Philippines had been under U.S. control since 1898. Following the Spanish-American War, July 4th was Philippine Republic Day until 1964, when the country moved its independence celebration to June 12th to mark its original Declaration of Independence from Spain in 1898.
So for 18 years, the Philippines celebrated its Independence Day the same day as the United States. Well, they decided to hand over sovereignty, and they'll say, hey, we have a nice Independence Day for you.
You can share our day.
Yeah, we'll share.
Sharing is caring. 1966, President Johnson signs the Freedom of Information Act. On July 4th, 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Freedom of Information Act into law, deliberately on Independence Day, emphasizing the symbolic connection between government transparency and American liberty. The FOIA allows citizens and journalists to request access to federal agency records. It's been used tens of millions of times since, and is one of the foundational tools in investigative journalism in America.
So signed on the 4th of July, here's your independence from government secrecy. Also on 4th of July, which we didn't list, in 1996, the Independence Day movie came out, which the United States teamed up with the rest of the world to battle our independence from an alien invasion.
Well, that's quite important.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Very moving speeches. Great Will Smith movie.
Always a classic.
All right, so famous July 4th birthdays. People who got to share a birthday with the country. So a quick note, July 4th is actually one of the least common birthdays in America. It ranks 362nd out of 365 days. Many parents schedule C-sections or inductions to avoid delivering on this holiday. So these famous July 4th babies are genuinely bucking the trend. So born in 1872, Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States, the only U.S. president ever born on the 4th of July. Coolidge was born in Plymouth Notch, Vermont, and served as president from 1923 to 1929. The only president born on July 4th was famous for never saying anything. He was called Silent Cal. His wife once bet someone she could get him to say 3 words at dinner. He turned to her and said, "You lose."
Wait, I'm sorry that That lost me.
That was 2 words, not 3. So
Yeah, okay. What a clever guy.
yeah, he was 1 word short there. Born in 1927, Neil Simon, playwright, The Odd Couple, Brington Beach Memoirs, one of the most prolific and commercially successful playwrights in Broadway history. Neil Simon was born on July 4th in the Bronx. His plays include The Odd Couple, Brington Beach Memoirs, and Barefoot in the Park. Ran for over 14,000 performances on Broadway combined. He received the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 1991 for Lost in Yonkers. He passed away in 2018. Born in 1924, Eva Marie Saint, an Academy Award-winning actress. Born July 4th, 1924 in Newark, New Jersey, Eva Marie Saint won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her very first film role, opposite Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront in 1954. She went along to star alongside Cary Grant in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. Her career spanned more than 7 decades.
Her first film, and she got an Academy Award.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's really impressive.
She's still alive, by the way, and it'll be 102 on this July 4th. So here's the one you might know. Born 1995, Post Malone, pretty successful rapper, singer, songwriter. Post Malone was born Austin Richard Post on July 4th, 1995, in Syracuse, New York, which is sort of our neighbor. Born in 1930, George Steinbrenner, owner of the New York Yankees. I'm not a Yankees fan, but he owns the Yankees. So he bought the Yankees for $8.8 million. They are now worth $7.5 billion. So good for Yankees fans.
Go George.
Born in 1937, Queen Sonja of Norway. Queen Sonja of Norway, born July 4th. I just want to say, probably like every Yankee fan was just pissed at me for being dismissive on that one, but it's okay. 1937, Queen Sonja of Norway. Queen Sonja of Norway, born July 4th, 1937, Oslo, has been the Queen of Norway since 1991 as the spouse of King Harald. Oh, is that 5 or 10?
Wait, hang on. I think V is 5. Or no, I'm sorry. I think V is 10. What's 5? V Roman numeral. Oh no, it's 5.
Yeah, I was thinking it was 5, but I wasn't. I think X is 10.
Oh, that's right. X, yeah. Yep, it's 5. The 5th.
So born 1937, Queen Sonja of Norway. There's a bunch of cool information about Queen Sonja. I would mispronounce all of it. So if you want to know more about her, then you definitely worth a Google. Also, born in 1998, how do you...
Malia?
Malia? Is that it?
I don't know, but it sounds like it.
Also, born in 1998, Malia Obama. I believe it's Malia. Daughter of the 44th President, Barack Obama. So she's the eldest daughter to Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, who was born on July 4th, 1998 in Chicago. She graduated from Harvard University and now works as a television writer and director in Hollywood. She grew up spending her summers with the country's fireworks as a birthday. Especially while Barack Obama was president, she had some pretty epic birthdays, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. And just imagine your birthday every single year being a national holiday.
So the upside is fireworks. The downside, if you have a birthday on July 4th, everybody's busy. So there you have it. The Erie Canal, a gorilla named Fireworks Child, Post Malone, a Norwegian queen, the God particle, and the only silent president. July 4th is a busy day.
It is indeed. And it's a lot to share a birthday with.
For the United States, July 4th will always be Independence Day, but it's also a day where Walt Whitman published his masterpiece, NASA Stuck a Landing on Mars, and Calvin Coolidge refused to make a big deal about any of it. From the Continental Congress in 1776 to the Freeman celebrations and Reconstruction Savannah to the fireworks on your street tonight. So a big part of the show is about community and knowing the places and people around us, being present, engaged with the world our kids are growing up in. And history is a part of that. Understanding that the 4th of July has meant different things to different Americans at different times doesn't diminish the holiday. It gives it more weight.
The words of the Declaration are big enough to hold all of it. They were true when they were written, even when they weren't being lived up to. and every generation since has had the opportunity to make it more true.
From a single gunpowder salute in Philadelphia in 1777 to the Freemen marching in Savannah in 1865 to the fireworks going over every city in America throughout this week, this holiday has a lot of story to it. We hope knowing a little more makes your celebration a little richer.
And as always, we really want to hear from you guys, so please contact us.
So, Julie, how can they contact us?
So on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, you can reach us at Ryan P. Millett Books. At Gmail, you can reach us at ryanpmillettbooks@gmail.com or by going to our website, which is www.ryanpmillettbooks.com.
I see a pattern there. You can find our books, our links, and everything we're working on the Linktree link in the show notes.
From the Ryan P. Millett Show, we wish you all a happy and safe 4th of July, and we hope that you're a part of the 150 million hot dog consumers on this 4th.
Yeah, have a few of them. Happy 4th of July, everyone. And thank you, Julie, for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Please subscribe to the feed. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a review or give it a share. So thank you for listening. Have a great week. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Be kind, be safe, and be kind and safe to others. And enjoy your 4th of July. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening in today to the Ryan P. Mallett Show. Come what may. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the vibe. We'll see you next time. Hope you're doing well. Until then, farewell.
Norwegian Queen. A Norwegian Queen. I gotta get through this.